Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Tiffany Blunt. I am the Director of Media Education at M&N. Stand by. Sorry for that. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Inside Virtual production. My name is Tiffany Blunt, and I am the Director here at the Center for Media Education. And tonight we are going to be live tweeting, so make sure you follow us on Twitter at NYCCME. We are also going to be taking questions at the end of this, so please make sure if you have any questions, put it in the chat. We are going to put those on YouTube. So just make sure you click watch on YouTube. Now, before we get jumping in, I do want to show you a very short, quick video that gives you a little bit of insight into what is virtual production. And thank you for checking out that video. Joining me tonight, I have an amazing panel of individuals, and so I'm just going to introduce them for you right now. To my left, Adrian Miranda. Adrian is a content creator with a physical therapy side hustle. His health focused comedy web series, Gross Anatomy, teaches human anatomy and how the body works. Gross Anatomy stars the ever frustrated fictional Dr. Dennis, who is assigned to teach a group of quirky and indifferent GED students about human anatomy, or he will fail graduate school. With his physical therapy training and filmmaking skills, Adrian is working to democratize health education by using humor to teach people about the human body so they can take better care of their health. Next, we have Asia Quinn Evans. Asia is a producer who specializes in immersive, interactive, and nonfiction experiences at the intersection of art and tech. She has worked with Black Public Media, American Documentary, PBS, March on Washington Film Festival, IDFA, Skylight, and the National Film Board of Canada, along with numerous independent creators. Currently, Asia is a producer for Black Public Media's emerging media program, BPM Plus, and supervising producer for the VR Equity Lab at March on Washington Film Festival. Previously, she worked for POV's interactive department, POV Spark. While there, she helped to launch Otherly, an Instagram Stories documentary series co-produced by the NFB and POV. Otherly was nominated for a Webby Award in 2002 and was recognized as part of Columbia University's 2002 Digital Dozen. Asia believes experiences created at the intersection of art, tech, and storytelling have the power to tap into untold narratives and build new systems in real time. And lastly, we have Andrew Aniceto. Andrew is the East Coast Director of Sales at Moses, one of CME's partners. He found his love for technology while working at Apple. During his time at Red Digital Cinema, he supported clients by providing education and tools needed to bring their projects to life. He continues to support creatives in his role at Moses, sharing the power of the industry standard Star Tracker camera tracking system, which shows them how to widen their view of what is possible in filmmaking. Thank you all for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
Of course, thanks.
So, a lot of people who may be watching this might not necessarily be familiar with virtual production. So, I really want to kind of start off with What is virtual production for you? There's many different elements to it. There's a lot of different technologies surrounding that term. But what does it mean for you, and how do you all use it or interact with it in your professional lives?
It means I can produce on my computer in my bedroom. Um, yeah, I mean, I think, I think for me, because I came from live action production, it also like provided a different option into instead of, oh, we're filming outside, but it's going to rain today. You know, what do we do? Now there's less barriers. The barriers are like, is the internet out? Do I know how to do this software or this technology? But it affords the possibility to just use my computer and some hardware, other hardware, software, and then pretty much produce anywhere virtually. That's for me what's it allows me to do currently.
Yeah, I think I would put it as real-time visual effects. And like you said, there's a lot of different things you could do with it, a lot of different categories. So like there's AR, there's augmented reality, there's VR, there's XR, there's mixed reality. You can even scan real objects and turn that into virtual as well. You could do full virtual studios where you're using virtual talent and virtual studios as well. So yeah, I think, like you said, it's breaking that barrier and opening up a lot of different options for filmmakers and just content creators.
Yeah, I would totally. I like that definition, real time VFX. I feel like that really simplifies what it is and what it can be.
Yeah.
I think a lot of my work uses different technologies to create digital works. And sometimes I think that can also be called virtual production. But in the industry, like I think when people are speaking to it, that is what they're
Yeah.
talking about, this like real time VFX, which sometimes involves real people and
Hmm.
sometimes is totally animated.
Yeah.
So it can also get confusing in that.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing for me about virtual production is that it's not really new. It's just sort of continuing to evolve, because when we think about green screen and the trains moving behind the the folks, and then it looks like
Yeah.
it's coming into the audience, like that was technically virtual production. It's just constantly evolved. And so I think people don't realize that they've had some sort of interaction. But how did you all get updated, informed, notified? Like, how did you even get into this space? Did you start in traditional production? Did you always somehow do and create virtual production? What is your introduction into VP?
I started working for a company called Moses. They brought me into virtual production. I was working with Red Digital Cinema before, so I was working with content creators and filmmakers. But I always wanted to be working with a company that that pushes boundaries and wants to be at the forefront of new technology. So that's kind of where I went. I'd love to say I'm on the creative side, but those are skills that I'm working on.
Yeah, actually, I like to tell this story that I used to work in science, and like the first time I was in a VR headset, I was actually looking at cells that I had scanned. And I think like taking real live objects, in this case cells, and then just putting them in virtual spaces was like the first time I got to be like up close and personal with this thing that like I shouldn't be able to touch. And that was like at least 3 years before I ever got into the actual like story making space. So I mean, I think virtual production definitely even extends beyond like where the industries we're working in. But that was my first introduction.
Another nerd. Awesome. So we have an hour, right, for me to tell my stuff. Uh, so I'm a physical therapist, actually. I was practicing excuse me. I was practicing up until August of this past year. But to be honest with you, it really came as a way. So in school, I was not the best student. So I'm a good physical therapist, but in school, I was not the best. And I realized I have terrible auditory processing. So you tell me something, I can listen to a song for 10 years and not know any of the lyrics. Actually, I was just telling them about a song I wrote 2 weeks ago, and I don't even know what the lyrics are. But I have terrible auditory processing. So physical therapy school was a lot of didactic lecturing, and I had a hard time. And then the pictures in the textbooks were all two dimensional. And so it didn't give you the full scope of how your shoulder moves because we live in 3D space. So I kind of knew when I left like my last year of grad school, I was like, this has to be on TV. I want to be like Bill Nye, but I want to be cooler and do storytelling. So for me, I kind of knew I wanted to push the limits of storytelling and production and technology with the knowledge I had in physical therapy. And so, uh, long story short, I got into production, regular production. After I started learning, after I graduated, I took 5 years to like focus on my profession in the clinic. And then when I learned production, I knew I wanted to recreate VFX. Like I loved action. I grew up in the '90s watching Eraser and Schwarzenegger and Tom Cruise, and I say that like I can retire when I recreate the Tom Cruise explosion on the train one day. Um, but the goal was that the only way I can teach the public people was to use 3D movement and to use VFX to entertain. And so I knew that that wasn't be my trajectory. I didn't realize, to be honest, that at this stage in my life, I would be creating virtual production. Like I didn't imagine that for like another 5 years. So it was a way to be able to like right now in the production I'm working on is like I can show you how your shoulder actually moves in real life, right? In real time and in real life and how it actually moves as opposed to from a lecture or actually even from like a YouTube video. So that's how it started for me that I knew I wanted to show people actually how your body moves. But I needed to use the tools that virtual production now or 3D game softwares, game engines could give.
So that kind of takes me into some of the specifics of the technologies because I feel like each one of you sort of utilizes it in different ways. And we've kind of used the term AR, augmented reality, camera tracking. You just kind of mentioned Unreal Engine. Maybe for those who aren't quite as versed as we are up here, maybe break down using some of the projects that you've worked on or are working on, how you've actually integrated virtual production into the storytelling process, or even for you, Andrew, how Moses has done that with clients and projects that they've helped facilitate.
Yeah, so we have one of our industry standard star trackers here. So to break that down, is we have these little reflective markers that we call stars that either go up on the ceiling or on the floor, and they're put up at random patterns so you can make a little constellation. So what we do is we take our sensor that lives above or below the camera, and we map that entire constellation so we know where the camera is going to be in the real world. So what the star tracker does is it tracks the pan, the tilt, the x, y, and z coordinates of wherever you move your practical camera, as well as focus and zoom. So you're getting all of that information. All of that is fed into the Unreal Engine or whatever engine you want to work into. And it interprets that. So whenever you move the practical camera, it moves the virtual camera. So when you're trying to create content, you're telling these stories, you're trying to convince the audience that you're not just standing on a static camera in front of a green screen or an LED wall. The LED wall will move, or the scene or background that you're using is also going to move, and you're going to get that parallax and start getting your audience to think, is that real? And then, ideally you'd be like, they don't even think about that. They just assume it's real. So we have the tools and software to do that to help the content creators and the filmmakers and anyone who wants to get into the industry.
And the benefit of that, if you think about it, for folks who are shooting on location or trying to shoot scenes where they can't control the weather, they can't control the lighting, the benefit of that is how much more control you have.
Oh yeah. You get 12 hours of the golden hour if you wanted. That's it opens up again, we will say it breaks the barrier of you have a certain amount of time or you have to be on location here. And now, the costs go down. We were talking about this earlier that there's more pre-production happening, but in the end, you're definitely lowering costs.
Yeah. Asia, I know you have a little bit more experience in the motion capture space. I would love for you to talk a little bit about what that consists of and how that's utilized in the projects that you worked on or helped facilitate.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so a lot of the projects I work on right now, I'm working with artists who are mostly working in nonfiction section, like documentary, but in VR or in augmented reality. And I think sometimes when people think about virtual production, maybe they're thinking, you know, Star Wars or an animated series, which is all very true. But I think we forget that we can also tell nonfiction stories in that space. So we just brought a group of artists with a company I work for, Black Public Media, to a motion capture studio, and folks were getting capture motion to embody um, Toussaint, for instance, who led the Haitian Revolution, and they're creating an experience. One of our fellows is creating an experience, Rayburn, um, where you actually get to interact and hold conversation with this historical figure, embodying different people from that time period and kind of getting their perspective of what they thought about this integral moment in all of our histories. Another person is bringing to life this queen, Kandaka, um, who is unknown in African history as someone who was a leader to her peoples. And so Ainsley Allen Robson got to be in this motion capture suit and put on what it was to be this queen that will go on to live in her nonfiction story about this real life person. And so I think in that way, motion capture is also really magical, and that it's giving the artists the opportunity to embody the people that they're going on to tell stories about, but also bringing like our histories like to this quote unquote modern or innovative space. But like you said, it's been around for so long. It's not so unlike, I think, the storytelling that we've always kind of done with each other as communities, you know? Yeah.
But I like that you mentioned that because I feel like um, folks think of facial capture, motion capture, and they associate that with animation and cartoons and video games, but not necessarily in narrative filmmaking or documentary filmmaking. And so I think it's important for folks who aren't necessarily familiar with the technology to know how they can use it and how it can be a storytelling tool beyond just creating characters, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And like for the instance for Kandaka, what they did to create that character is they actually took renderings of what actual statues of this woman look like, then put them into a game engine, finished those out, basically filled in all the missing pieces from what was ruins essentially, and then brought her back to life. And so yeah, you can do that too. We had another artist who actually just 3D scanned himself and then put himself into the game engine and then spoke to his audience in that way. And so then it actually becomes like truly quite real at that point. Yeah.
So, I'm going to kick it over to Adrian so we can talk a little bit about. We've been mentioning this game engine, Unreal Engine. I know there's other, gaming programs, but maybe just talk a little bit about what is Unreal Engine? How do you use it? And how can a creative who maybe has no experience utilizing it can integrate it?
Oh man, give me the hard question. It's like
I did.
abstract.
That's why I sat too close to me.
Great.
So,
Got this.
so what was the question again? Well, what do you?
So just talk a little bit about Unreal Engine. I know you
Okay.
got some experience with it.
Yeah,
Just a little bit
yeah.
about how you use it and how it can be a storytelling device.
Sure. So, I mean, if you played video games, you know that you walk around with a character and you have these options to shoot, jump, crouch, and a conquest or a journey. And so Unreal Engine lets you, it's like a playpen. Like you can add all your characters in there. And, the other one that's familiar is Unity. And I've used Unity a little bit. But, way I talk about Unreal Engine is that I believe, at least in my opinion, that for cinematic and for filmmaking style content, it affords me a little bit more flexibility. It's actually easier to use because I came from using Adobe Suite. But yeah, it's just the way that you can bring in worlds. You can animate worlds. You can animate characters. You can use cameras to move around, just like Andrew was talking about. A virtual camera to move around to Dolly, and it's just like a big playpen. Like it's just like like a bunch of toys you can play with on your computer, and you can bring things to life. Just kind of like Asia was saying, like you can photogrammetry yourself and literally bring yourself into that gaming engine, and you could play a game with yourself, or you can create a cinematic movie starring yourself, looking like you, or you can create a cyborg for free, or create a completely different character that you can imagine. And one thing that I've been told is by people who are helping me out or I'm learning from is like, don't limit your imagination. If you imagine, you can actually create it. And so Unreal Engine gives you a lot of flexibility. And you want the camera to move here, you want golden hour, you want to have green hair, but you already have green hair in real life. But if I want to have a mohawk and red hair, I could do that in the gaming engine. So, and it gives you a lot of ways to automate things as well. So if I want to, every time the camera goes, in this direction, the character explodes. You can do that. Or when you walk into this chair, let's say we're in a 3D environment in Unreal Engine, I can tell the system when I walk into that chair, I explode. So that's why I use Unreal Engine, and that's a bit about what the engine does. Or it's a software that you can play in 3D and create content in.
Now, how have you created content in the engine? Because
Yeah.
obviously, I hope you're not blowing things up if you're talking about physical therapy
Yeah.
and body parts.
Haha, yeah, why not? I joke, but no, I will be. So I use it so what you were talking about, the description of Gross Anatomy, Dr. Dennis. So I'm a physical therapist. It's very, very, very loosely based on me. But it's so I did do a live action web series, 5 episodes with this character, Dr. Dennis. It's kind of like Community, meets Scrubs. And so what I am doing was that I took the web series and I said I ran out of money, right? And I want to do way more special effects and sketches, and I don't have the money. So I decided with this opportunity, let me bring this character into the metaverse. And so Dr. Dennis, there will be actually a little bit of live action. So what I'm doing is bringing that character, Dr. Dennis, which is already done, into like this metaverse space kind of environment where he has to save the world in the metaverse from this evil robot that the Gross Anatomy headquarters is like the last part. So there's a commander of the army, and then there's his sidekick, who's this big muscular person, but he's clumsy and he can't fight. So, and then there's the robots, like a horde of robots. They're defending, and so Dr. Dennis has to keep the robots healthy because their bodies respond just like humans. And so, and then the enemy, the evil robot is using these metallic skeledroids to attack. And so what that lets me do is that I can, if I want to drive in the spaceship and fight this robot, I can. If I want to, which I'm doing, a hologram of the human body and have a sequence where I'm explaining how the scapular muscles are important in the shoulder health, I can do that. So that's why I'm using it, and that's how I'm using it. And there are gonna be animations of fight scenes, animations of the human body anatomy. There's gonna be animations of like dramatic moments and camera movements. So that's how I'm using it. And so it's kind of like a spin-off of the live action web series. And because I ran out of money, I can do this somewhat affordably, and I can explode things, I can fly things, I can drive things off cliffs, I can punch skeletons and make their heads explode. So that's what it affords me in the game engine.
So how do you all perceive this technology as being accessible to folks, to being able to use to create their content, versus I can pull out my phone and make a movie or make a film, because when you think about certain types of content where VR is involved and there has to be headsets, or just the technology in general being a different learning curve, like how similar or different do you feel that VR is from traditional video or television production, from your experience, if you've kind of seen both sides of the landscape?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of curious. Like hearing you speak, I wonder how long did it take you to learn, like how to like really use Unreal Engine in a way that was like that you could get through production. I mean, you were just talking about like 2 weeks ago, you wrote a song and suddenly you're already like able to like animate that.
Yep.
But like for me, I mean, I'm not on the technical side so much, right? Like I'm working with artists to kind of develop their projects to that point, and we're hiring teams to do these things. But when I saw like Unreal Engine 5 like roll out their cityscape, I was like, oh, like any like a 10-year-old who really wants to nerd out on this can create freaking like Spider-Man.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong at all.
You know what I mean? Like it could actually like really disrupt spaces. But I think what I've learned working with folks who aren't creative technologists or who aren't developers, it's the learning curve that I think sometimes becomes the inaccessible part. But I'm curious what y'all think.
That's
I
good because I have that question. Like, how did y'all learn how to do this? I
Yeah.
literally am
Yeah,
curious.
I agree that there is a fairly steep learning curve to figuring out like an engine like that, and it does take time. With Epic has the classes that you can take. You can do stuff online. There's a lot of content out there that helps you learn this, but um, yeah, I think it opens up the ability for if someone wanted to blow things up, they can. Um, it,
And how much would that cost on a
it-
real film set?
exactly the cost of that, just the CG alone there, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it it's free. You can download it and you can start playing around. There are free environments and free uh tables and chairs and things that you want to explode. You could actually get that and start playing around and start learning. And I think this is a good time for a lot of people to start picking it up, to start learning. And there are places like here at MNN that are going to be able to help you find that and teach.
Go ahead.
So I think, yeah, as someone who's a creator, uh, uh, I guess talent, and then also developing in the tech side, um, you know what? I've had kind of a tough time with that question recently, and I think it's because there is a lot of accessibility. Unreal Engine is free; it is free. However, it comes at the cost of having a very fast computer that would cost you a PC maybe over 2 grand, or an Apple computer more than that, way more than that. It comes at the expense of fast internet as well. It comes at the expense of a lot of. If you want to have a cityscape, you might have to buy one for $10, but 5 or 6 assets does add up. So there is this barrier to entry if you don't have the right resources for internet service in your, maybe you're in NYCHA housing and you have terrible internet. And it happened to me just when I moved back to. I grew up in Washington Heights, and so I kind of think about when, one of my goals, like one day have a pipeline for every age of people who didn't go to college or didn't go to school or in high school or young. But there is some barriers. Like it's not really easy in one aspect, right? On the other aspect, it is very challenging. Even as someone who knew Adobe Premiere Pro, Adobe After Effects, a little bit of Blender, but I could tell you right now, if you hold on and you kind of keep learning and doing tutorials and you keep just messing up and crashing the system, the learning curve kind of goes really slow and then kind of spikes up. So even now, things I'm just like, I don't need to do that, but I think I know how to do it now. Like a blueprint or an animation or something. I'm just like, oh, I think I could do that. You know what, Agent, hold off. So where before it was like, oh man, I can't even think about step 4, 5, or 6. So because there's so many options. I think Unreal Engine, we think about it as maybe like, live real-time VFX with an LED wall and virtual cameras, real time. Or for me, it's just animation production. But you can model in that. You can do full-on animations, only animations. You could do, I don't know, a bunch of landscape artistry. So it's it would it's cheap for sure, I think, but it also means that like you said, you have an iPhone 14, you can make a cinematic movie right now, you know, but your camera can only hold so much data, right? And so there's an easiness to it in the fact that if you use it for its limited capacity, if you have internet service and you have a decent computer, you could do plenty of stuff. But there are definitely some limitations to it. That I think in the future will get much faster and easier. But that's what I think about. The learning curve is very hard, and I think it's linear, and then it just kind of shoots up. So you have to hold on and just be kind of like stubborn.
Are there any specific skills or I guess traits that someone may have that can help them sort of transition into this type of technology, creating this type of content?
I think a comfortable understanding of what the Unreal Engine can do is a great start. Like you said, it is a little it is a little hard to get into it very quickly. Um, and I think being able to know what it's capable of is huge. So, I understand like you would definitely need to have a pretty strong computer to get, if you start building an environment and you want to see it in 4K, you want ray tracing, you want anti-aliasing and all the reflections there. Yeah, you're going to need to have a pretty beefy setup. But at the same time, there's a balance that you need to also be able to remember that if like let's say we're doing something on an LED wall, everything at 4K with all the dials turned up, you're going to get like 3 frames per second on this wall. So you have to be able to learn how to optimize your scene to be like, all right, well, we're only shooting in this section, so let's just pull that out. Let's turn the resolution down. Let's take reflections off. So figuring out all of this is definitely key if you want to get into the virtual production world. Um, and I think the biggest thing is going to be patience. It's not going to be something that's going to happen to you right away. It's a process, and you don't want to rush that process. You want to know how to do everything properly.
I would say from working with artists, it also is helpful to like come with an idea. And like I mean, I work in the virtual production space, but also with people who are using like projections or who are using 3D scans, who are utilizing different technologies to kind of hack them to create the story that they want to tell. And I find a lot of times like that is so motivating. Like maybe you actually don't want to go and like sit down and like learn Unreal Engine, but if you have this idea, you kind of just like will figure out the things that you need to do to make your particular story happen and kind of like sideways yourself into it.
Empower yourself.
Yeah, empower yourself, and you'll find that you'll learn a lot of technologies along the way just by virtue of trying to see the thing that's like in your head. And so if you're starting with an idea and you just like know that what the tools are to help make it happen, and you can figure out the lessons that you need to like get that output, I think that's a really great and encouraging way to start. Or at least from working with artists, a lot of times we start there, we can get further. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like excellently put. Exactly it. Yeah.
Are there resources out there for folks who want to connect with people who are kind of already in the space, who have the skills? Like, what are ways that people can get a little bit more part hands on, but just information? This is something that even for us at MNN is new, and we're all just sort of self discovering. But like, where can just the general viewer go online in or outside of New York City to maybe connect with creatives who are already kind of doing this work and can be an inspiration?
I think social media, to be honest, and for me, LinkedIn has been great for that. Discord channels, and to be honest, as someone who knows someone who's really advanced in Unreal Engine, said we're all figuring this stuff out. There's glitches on Unreal Engine. There's something that I was trying to do, like audio activated glowing intensity, and it was not working. So they reached out to Unreal Engine themselves, and so Discord channels, other creators who are using Unreal Engine, some YouTube channels comment. Usually they were pretty responsive, and people are trying to help each other learn. I haven't really had an issue with someone saying, "I'm really busy, I don't want to talk to you," or being rude. They're usually like, "Hey, listen, I'm finishing this up. Can I get back to you in a week?" But yeah, just kind of leveraging your network and just poking your head in and commenting, being engaged. The more you're engaged, the more they're going to give you something back. But I think they told me it's the wild, wild west out there. So everybody's figuring it out and learning why things are not working or not responding. So I think that's also something I had to realize because I was so frustrated at times that it's not that many people who are truly, truly, truly experts at this, especially ones that are kind of at arm's length, right? So I think having patience, being in the social media channels, that's going to be a way to learn.
Yeah, I think that also on top of that, there's a lot of like BTS video out there, kind of showcasing the workflow and different processes. There are ASC articles to read to help out with that. I'm going to throw our own little plug in there. We actually have a Moses Academy coming to New York. It's happening the week after Cine Gear. It's a 5-day class on installing, calibrating, using our full system, getting a scene out there, using green screen, making sure that that your AR elements are sticking to where they're supposed to be. So, we have that happening March 13th to 17th. And what I'm trying to do in New York is to start building a community. And just while I was at Red, we had this community building event once a month called the Red Underground, where we would invite people to come into our space and showcase anything that they made. It didn't have to be shot on Red. We were just trying to build that community, and it was great. And I have a couple of ideas. I'm looking for some studios with some LED walls and using our tracking to kind of. There are a lot of people there out there playing around in Unreal and building out these environments or these characters, and the furthest they've gotten is seeing it on their computer screen or seeing it possibly on a green screen. But being able to see what it would look like in like a studio setting on a wall and inviting people, I think that's huge. And I think that it's slowly coming up. There's more people interested in virtual production, and we want to be a part of the start of that community.
I think there was a statistic that was like 40% new users this year with Unreal Engine.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Do you think COVID played a part in that uptick?
I think it definitely accelerated it. It was definitely moving in that direction, and then virtual production, remote production, all of that just had to speed up. And with just hardware, it shot up, and it kind of plateaued a little bit, and it's starting to come down as far as price goes. So it's getting more accessible and more affordable for certain companies and people. But yeah, I definitely think COVID was a huge catalyst for it.
I also think maybe people were watching more. I mean, my advice was gonna be is like just like watch a bunch of projects. I mean, the first thing like YouTube obviously has these behind the scenes. I learned about virtual production. I've never seen Star Wars, but like I watched all the BTS of like the virtual production of like The Mandalorian. And
I did too before I saw it.
Yeah, there's a lot there. But even if you're interested in VR or like augmented reality, I think watching as many projects as you can and like seeing who's behind them, like what are the production companies, who are those artists, and like backtracking that way is also, I think, part of it. And I think more and more people were watching things online, and maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know.
How have you all seen the technology sort of shift and change over time from, your beginnings in it? And I say that thinking about the days of when I used to do green screen productions and, there was no camera tracking. It was what it was. And we had to fake it. We'd have a little shot that was cropped in and a version of that where it looked like it was happening, but it wasn't quite happening. And this is like 10 years ago. And so I'm just curious how you've seen the technology sort of grow over the years and if there's things that are, accessible to general folks. I know like on the phone, the iPhone Pros can do some AR and any other things that people could maybe realistically have access to as you mentioned, things becoming more affordable, more accessible.
I use for my musical number for the evil robot. I actually use my phone for motion capture, and so for me that was mind blowing because it was pretty good. It was actually very good. So I set my phone up, I did a little dance number, and then recorded it, put up some software. Within 5 minutes, I had the 3D motion capture data and animated, and I can put it into Unreal Engine and then put it into the character. So that for me is recently has been something I'm realizing that eventually, well, you need all these sensors and a bodysuit that I have as well to get you might need two cameras. Andrew has like the practical camera for the shot, and then the one camera, doing the movement of the character. So I wouldn't be surprised if suits are either like, very like comfortable fabric and very little wires, or just a camera. So that's for me recently what I've noticed, and then just the software just improves, looks nicer, more realistic options. But for me, I've always thought it looks awesome. So
We're working with an artist right now, Damien McDuffie, out of Oakland, California, and he's working on an AR tour of Black Panther murals within Oakland. And he has his own app called Black Terminus, but he's kind of made it his mission to like anything that you need to do to be able to create an AR for a mural, he finds an iPhone app that can do it. And he kind of finds the best one so that other people can kind of tap in. And you can actually use his app to create AR right there. But like facial motion capture apps, he's kind of just like looked and found the best one. But the iPhone really, you can do every. I mean, even motion capture now, you don't necessarily need a suit. It will just capture your actual motion, and then AI will kind of interpret what's happening between those. It's not as accurate, I would say, as like these motion capture setups if you can get access to them, like here at MNN. But it is becoming quite ubiquitous, and I think it will just continue to go in that direction.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're right. Like you could do a lot with your iPhone, and the difference between that and getting like a camera, an actual like camera tracker, is just the accuracy. That's kind of the difference there, where like that's stuck there. If you had your phone, it could be moving around a little bit. But yeah, technology just it keeps changing, it keeps evolving. Um, like talent tracking. You used to have like some sort of like a little radio that you would put in your pocket, and that's where the system would kind of know where you were in the space a little bit. We have something, we were talking about this earlier, with like an XN suit, where we use a little OEM star tracker, and it's just on your talent, and it keeps you stuck there, while you're walking around in the virtual world. And now there's like lidar scans, or they're using AI to kind of separate talent from LED walls, or without the need of putting like a green screen or blue or black or whatever screen you wanted to do. But technology just keeps changing, and once we find that new thing that starts working, everything that is currently working is going to lower in price and make it easier for a lot of people to get into. But yeah, I think um we're in, I don't want to say it. I feel like we're in phase one of virtual production. I know it's been around for a very long time, but this is when like th- the most amount of eyes are on it, and that's when the technology changes.
So I want to kind of get into people's content. If someone goes all in and say, I'm in this, I want to do it, I want my work seen. How does the distribution part of it sort of shift a little bit, or even from the competition side, whether it's entering your work into festivals or having people see it? I know there's some things with 360 and YouTube and them starting to, I watched I'm a rock climber, and I watched a video of someone rock climbing, and I knew it was a 360 video, but I didn't even know how to interact with it. And then all of a sudden I was like sweat and I was like, "Oh, now I can see where you're going and where you've been." And so, I think it's kind of interesting for someone if they decide to get into this, but they're like, "Do I put it on my YouTube? Will Eminem air it? Like, what do I do with it?" And I know, even Asia, from your perspective, it's like a lot of immersive in art galleries. And so, can you just talk a little bit about the ways that people can use it and distribute their work?
Yeah, I think in the way that like it totally depends on your output. I mean, sometimes people are using virtual production, but they're creating like 2D films, right? Like traditional, where or versus something where it's a 3D. You have to like put on a headset or be able to like pivot in a 360 environment in order to see the whole platform. And so there's a couple of different ways. I think if you're using virtual production to create a 2D film, then there are those traditional routes. I think for us, it really runs the gamut of like location based experiences where you really need to be there to interact with the project, to things that you can do at home and on YouTube with 360. The industry right now for what I call like interactive media or immersive media, I think is at kind of a crossroads. And maybe it is quite, maybe it's because virtual production is coming more into play. But a lot of our experiences do go on to be in the festival circuit. Like Tribeca Film Festival, for instance, has an immersive, curated lineup. And so you can go and see projects that are in VR and in augmented reality, and are narrative pieces or documentary pieces. And so there's a whole kind of art form and industries surrounding this kind of experimental work at this intersection of art and technology if you look for it. I think we are actively seeking more distribution spaces. I think it would be great um, for them to be more available. A lot of people talk about how like there's movie theaters for movies. Like, what does that look like for interactive experiences? I think people are coming to know them more. Like, I think the Van Gogh experience, for instance, if you're familiar with that, these like huge projections of Van Gogh painting on the wall, they kind of move and interact with you. Um, I'm hearing people say the word immersive for the very first time, and I think as more and more people use this language and have some touch point to what that could mean, it also opens up the space for, I think, more artful, narrative driven stories to be out there and available for the public, and for it not to feel like this kind of niche arty thing on the side. Um, yeah, so that's kind of my take on it.
Distribution. I mean, I'll be honest. That's something that I'm trying to improve on. Is just share it. Any social media, YouTube. I mean, there's also you want to learn how to get people's attention. Movie posters, YouTube thumbnails, descriptions, and then your content as well. But I would say what I've come across with a lot of people, because I get asked quite a bit, is how do I how do I start filming? How do I create content and just regular 2D video? But then also in some people right now, in 3D regular little people, yeah, the normal people. Ask me. And there's a vulnerability to it, so it doesn't matter if it's good, it's good. People are going to see it. There's definitely some strategy about how to get more eyes on it, but I think it's kind of get over the self-limiting belief that you're not good enough or your content's not good enough, and if it's not good, you'll find out, and then you'll do better next time, and you'll never do it again, or you'll do it purposefully the next time. So I think it's just use all the channels. We were talking about Twitch earlier. I've never done live streaming, to be honest. I'm actually terrible at like live. Like, as a physical therapist, being live and talking, like I'm terrible. But if I act, well, this is film, so it's different. But like, if I were to like be a YouTuber and talking about, I might be very awkward. But like my virtual character would be doing live Twitch stream. But there, you have to kind of get over this, you know, lack of kind of confidence or scared to get feedback from it. So it doesn't matter. You can go on Snapchat, what TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, submit it to a film festival, submit it to, I'm sure there's virtual production film festivals out. I haven't looked recently, but any there's a Big Apple Film Festival for those of you in New York City. But I think there's always, and that's what everybody says, I want to do it, and they never execute. And that's really what limits you. The distribution, there's tons of channels, there's tons of places. And there's plenty of places looking for content too on streamers, like little people again, looking for content. So I think that there's an opportunity right now that it doesn't matter where you place it, just place it, get feedback from it, and do better. And if it's good, people are gonna respond to it.
Completely agree. And it's like get yourself out there. Don't be afraid of the feedback. Take the feedback, learn from it. Like you said, all the social media platforms, LinkedIn is also another great place to actually um, meet other creatives or see where they're working and then do a little bit of research on them. Facebook has a lot of groups that have a ton of virtual production groups where you go, hey, I have this question, and 10,000 people will come in like maybe try this. Community there is great, and I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and here at CME, we are really excited to be building ourselves a virtual production community, a media community. So make sure you join our newsletter so you know when we have events, when we have virtual production classes and workshops, and really trying to make this technology accessible. We really want to help. The community, because we don't feel like it should be this big barrier to entry. One of sort of my last questions that I have before we go to questions from the audience, and if you haven't, put your questions in the chat. On YouTube, we're taking questions. If you're following us on Twitter, we can take some questions there at NYC CME. But one of the things that I'm curious about is sort of the roles. When we think of 2D or traditional video and film production, we think about the editor and the director and the talent. But from a virtual production standpoint, outside of obviously understanding how to navigate Unreal Engine, what do you feel like are some key roles that people could be starting to sort of hone in on and say, I want to get a job in this space, or I want to go work for CBS VFX Studios, or go to LA. What are some essential roles that they can be mindful of? And one thing we learned in this whole space is that it's such a new and ever changing world, that the titles of those roles may be constantly changing. But just conceptually, things that people who may want to say, because one thing I do know that we've learned is that there is a high demand for people who understand this technology, and there is not enough people who know how to use the technology. And so just getting into the door, what do you all feel would be some of the, most important things?
I think outside of like an Unreal artists and working within the software, I think a VP operator knowing what the technology can do and how to calibrate it and make sure it works properly. Because if that's not working, like let's just say the star tracker is not working, then the whole shoot isn't going to work. And there's a lot of different pieces to the pie, and you have to be able to know what each of them does. You don't need to master it, but you need to know what it does. So I think, doing a little bit of research there, looking into what a VP operator is, and the different companies that provide the technology. It's like every LED is a little different. Like the wall could be curved, it could be straight, it could have a different pixel pitch. And I would start off with something basic like that, like VP operator. Just like Google it and start from there.
I'll maybe put a plug in for producers. I think artists are always looking for producers. I think, and if you're thinking about more like studio productions, finding someone that's able to have like a technical go between the work, like the art that's trying to be made, and like the actual practicality of like what that looks like on the ground as a project manager, is few and far between, especially folks who can really communicate with talent and also with developers who are working like an Unreal Engine. I just like love producing. I think it's a great middleman position, and it, it's not easy for projects to really get off the ground without a team of producers. And so if you're interested in being able to kind of have a bird's eye view of all the things that are happening, and you're like really interested and invested in getting a project from ideation to like out in front of an audience, yeah, I'll put a plug in for producing being a great role to take on.
Do you feel like there's much of a difference between being a film producer or a television producer and transitioning to a virtual production producer?
Yeah, I think if I was gonna go for a more virtual production role, which is not necessarily what I do, but I think being a technical producer in that space means that you do have a sense of the technology. Maybe you're not getting your hands in, and you're not necessarily able to do it, but you know all the terminology. You know what it means. I think you could transition, because at the end of the day, even if you're utilizing a virtual camera, you're still talking about setting up a shot, right? Like the translation, I think, outside of the actual software, um, it's pretty similar. You're using a lot of the same um, tropes, so to speak. So, but I think it would take some education on the part of the person who wanted to make
Any thoughts, Adrian?
Uh,
that transition.
to paraphrase Spike Lee, I'm the set designer, the DP, and the actor,
The
backup
producer.
actor, producer, music design. I- it's a tough one because I think dabbling in a little bit of everything, you'll figure out what speaks to you. Um, I'm by necessity mostly because I have to do everything. Because yeah, to be honest, like I would love to work with both of you because I would just show up as talent and that's it. Write the script and show up as talent and have everybody else produce it. Um, but I think using the software, I think one of the I would actually say either I'm being a level sequencer uh, person or a landscape artist would be um, to start off in Unreal Engine. But there's just so many things, there's so many things and everybody's different. And so but if you try several things out, you might figure out that you might like it. I met several people who's like, well, I wanted to be a DP, and then I realized I loved being a director, right? Or a director, and then I realized I don't like directing. I like being an actor, or vice versa. So I think it's just try something, see how it works, see what's easiest for you, but also what you enjoy, or you might like a challenge. But I think to get into it, the environments to me are fun, but they're also interesting because it kind of gives you a way to understand the actual software and to navigate around it. So I think that would be how I'd recommend that you get into using the virtual production.
Yeah, and just one of my own personal things that I would suggest if you are a cinematographer, a camera operator, whether it's your mobile phone or a DSLR, mirrorless camera, you know, the virtual camera and virtual cinematography is different, but I think it's a very nice transition if you understand depth of field
Yeah.
and lenses and lighting, but doing all that virtually to me it's just the tech part, but if you understand the concepts of color temperature, of lens, and how shots can create emotion, it's a really easy transition. It's just like, okay, I already get this, I just need to know this basic tech part of it.
Well, it happened to me last week or 2 weeks ago. You use a camera, you change a 50 millimeter to an 85 millimeter lens manually, or in Unreal, just click a drop down.
Yeah.
You double the sensor width. You can have any camera that you want, and you can change the depth of field, like f-stop. And so, it, as long as and then I was like, oh, I know this, and just literally just drop down and change it. So that's actually a really good point. That in Unreal, you can use any camera you want and have any lens that you want, and it's pretty fascinating. That's fun to me.
Yeah. So we got quite a few questions. So I'll jump into
Really?
the question side of things. Um, but first of all, and this is a good question, even when I was going to ask if no one else did. But Megan wants to know what advice would you give to those who are just starting out in content creation?
It's all about the story. Literally, it says content, right? So I'm fortunate that I had a passion from day one, even before I started learning production. And I would say, I mean, a lot of art, what the book called "Seal Like an Artist" speaks to me a lot. Michael Jackson wore the short pants because of Gene Kelly and the white socks and the loafers, and so we typically are impressed or inspired by another artist that comes before you, and then you have your own truth. And so it all comes down to the story. If you have a great story, you can have terrible looking characters, terrible looking landscapes, terrible Unreal Engine artistry. But if the story hits home, hits hard, and it's relatable about the way you grew up, about challenges that you face in life, about social justice issues, about poverty, about health, about education, or just comedy, right? Talking about real life situations. You can make a really compelling content about online dating and how challenging it is or how great it is. So it really doesn't matter. It's just kind of find out what you want to talk about, what's inside yourself that other people can benefit from as well. So that's where it starts, is like the storytelling. Everything else is just toys, tools.
Yeah, I would totally. I mean, we're always telling artists like you're not working for the technology. Like, how is technology enabling you to tell this story that's in your mind that you want to say? So I think, yeah, definitely starting with story first. I mean, it's one thing if you just want to create something to be able to play with these tools. I think that's totally valid. But if you're really just like working from the place of like you have this idea to tell, maybe virtual production isn't the right space. Maybe it actually would work out better in traditional film, or maybe it actually should be an AR. Figure out how best to tell your story, and then worry about the tech that's going to help you do that.
I I'm not there yet, but it's kind of put yourself out there, you know, and just keep learning from your experiences. Like, you put something together and people go, well, what if you tried this, or what if you tried that, or I like this, I like that. So when you go to the next thing you throw on, you remember that, and you just start growing from that. And I think just not being afraid of putting yourself out there and be a little vulnerable.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love when people mention story because story is something that I'm excited for us to we've been so tech based historically as a department, and we just were like, we just want you to use the camera and make something. We don't care about the story, just make something. And now we're trying to flip it and really hone in on the story and the impact that the stories can have. And while we're doing that, we'll make sure you get the tech knowledge. But at the end of the day, we really wanted to have some heart. So I'm happy you said that. Now this is a good question, and again, this is something that probably us as a department will have to navigate and work with folks on. But Gail wants to know, for people who are just starting out, like, what are the babyest of steps to get started into virtual production, XR, VR, like this whole thing? Is there somewhere that's kind of like a really good entry point? Because Unreal, we already said, is going to be a lot for some people.
I'd say just start off on YouTube and just watch as many videos as you can and kind of be like, I'm interested in that position, or how did they do this and how did they do that? And you kind of have to take it upon yourself, because right now that I don't know if there is like a central location that is going to offer all the information you need to know before you get into it. So it's kind of, going out there and doing the research yourself.
I would say watch projects. If you're interested in virtual reality or augmented reality, or even WebXR, like, go see what's been made before you. I think it's like so generative, to see what's out there and how people are utilizing technology to tell stories about emotions and about subtext and about like all these things that like communicate something different because you're using your body differently in the storytelling. Some ways to do that are to look at film festivals that have immersive programming. DocuBase out of MIT is like a great collection of just work that's been made before that like uses tech and documentary. Black Public Media, BPM Plus. We work with artists, and every year we have a showcase of in development projects that utilize technology in their storytelling. Watch those pitches, but just start with watching things and enjoying them too. I think.
From a different perspective, I would say, kind of, I feel like there's a little bit of a hierarchy in software. So like, know your film editing, know your, um, uh, cameras. Adobe After Effects is a good kind of middle ground to go from normal video to the 3D realm, because you can kind of 3D make 3D options, use cameras and lights, and then dabble in Blender, and then usually from there you can kind of go into one of the virtual production places.
No, I'm glad you said that, because I do agree that if you have some basic video editing or even 3D motion graphic editing experience, walking into Unreal won't feel so overwhelming. If you have a basic understanding of lenses, walking into like those very basic things, if you don't have that, then yeah, you're going to be in there spinning wheels. I mean, because there's already enough with the 50 million menus and places and buttons, and that can't overwhelm you. But if you're like, I know what a timeline is, this feels like this is where I can actually animate some things. Like, I think that is a good starting point, and not so much just take a Premiere class or a Resolve class. Like, really get immersed in editing. A lot of folks I see kind of just get into it. They do their, I can get my footage in and I can get my footage out. But that's all I'm doing. There's so much more that some of these programs can do. And if you really spend some time in them, and you feel that comfortable that you can troubleshoot yourself, you won't have to feel as overwhelmed. So thank you. I like that. Kiri wants to know, if anyone uses reality capture scans a live object to a digital file. What do you think of this program? If any of you are familiar with that program?
I do not.
Yeah,
Same.
okay.
Scans a live object
To-
a digital file.
Yeah, it probably creates a 3D.
It's like a type of like LiDAR or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe like photogrammetry.
Mhm,
Something
yep.
like that.
Sure.
There's so many programs now out there that allow you to capture 3D scans at this point. It's whatever works and where you can take that like FBX file and do something with it. I think a lot of it is just knowing what can you do with that after you make the scan? And how good is the scan? How good did it capture the scan? Because a lot of it doesn't necessarily get all 360 points. So
I do think it's cool though. Like I know an artist who 3D scanned every dessert that she ate for a year and like put them all into a virtual space and just like created this like gluttonous experience of just like desserts. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, there is something about 3D scanning an object that is like ephemeral, that's like not gonna last forever, like a chocolate cake. You know what I mean? So just what do I think about it? I think it's kind of cool to 3D scan stuff. I don't know.
well, I'm excited because, no shame plug, we do have a photogrammetry 3D scanning workshop coming this spring. So, if you're more interested in it and want some practice and want to learn about it, and we'll be doing it with iPad. So, it's something that you can transfer to your own devices. This is an interesting question. Lucky wants to know, what is the best way to pitch a virtual production to a new client?
Show them samples. So it depends on the client what they're depends on the client. They may not know what they're looking for, and so that's a challenge. And I've had talks with people who do that, and really showing them the ability of what they can do, or what virtual production can do for their company. If it's a client that's trying to sell something or market something, then I would say create a sizzle of other virtual production pieces of content, cut it together, and then show them.
Yeah, I think demoing what the virtual production pipeline kind of looks like and what they can produce, at least from some clients that I've talked to, it's been, we've spent X amount on these shoots. If we went virtual, what would it look like? And for the most part, that cost right there is dramatically lower. So you wouldn't have to go to location. You wouldn't have to do you wouldn't have to get like a craft service truck. You're all in one space, and you don't have to move anyone anywhere.
I'm gonna pitch it back to you, Andrew, because this question is specific to you. Someone wants to know more information about the event you mentioned in March, and if they can't find it on Moses.com, where can they find?
It's gonna be live on Moses.com soon.
Okay.
But it's gonna be from March 13th to the 17th. You're gonna get a hands-on experience playing with all of the technology, using our Star Tracker, putting it on cameras, moving it in a green screen environment, putting a scene together, doing the lighting. There is a cost. It's $2,500, but it's for a full 5-day course. It's going to be at Able Cine in Brooklyn, and it's the week after Cine Gear. So if you were going to be out here for Cine Gear already to take a look at all the new toys there, extend your trip. Also, if you want, my email is andrew@moses.com. That's mo-sys.com. And I can get you more information as well.
Cool. Thank you. Some of these other questions are kind of for us, but Unreal Engine, as Adrian said, is free. It is a free program, but the caveat to that is having a computer system that can handle running it. That can sometimes be a challenge. So I am excited that I do know eventually resources like that will be available for folks here who need to have that access because they don't have the internet connection, they don't have the GPU or the CPU to be able to run a program of that nature. But it is a free program, and yes, we will eventually have classes in Unreal Engine. And also being mindful of baby steps and the fact that it is a system that can be utilized in so many different industries in so many different ways, from architecture to aerospace to, of course, the space that we're referring to. So we do want to make sure that we can provide the beginner level, entry level basics of Unreal Engine and how to utilize that program. The last question I'm going to take from the audience, and this is an interesting question, especially since we had a filmmaker panel earlier this week where they somewhat addressed this or talked about this, but Lucky wants to know, is virtual production profitable for you all? Basically, has it been something that you've been able to make money from? And like I said, if you saw the panel on Wednesday, you'll know that a lot of folks are like, this is passion work, so.
I'll be honest, actually, even though I haven't received cash yet, I've received about 35 grand in equipment because I was doing virtual production on a really crappy computer and somehow caught the eye of people. So, in a sense, yeah, I got a lot of free stuff, including the motion capture suit. And even now, I'm getting more um, big companies reaching out to me, uh, beginning to like literally just yesterday I had a call with a big company. Um, and it took a while to be honest. But yes, it becomes a passion, and depends. Your passion turns into a revenue generator. Depends on how much you want it. But so in a sense, yeah, because I was gonna buy that stuff myself. My goal was like in the next within 2024 was to purchase all my equipment, and I got it way faster. So if you want to say that 35 grand of equipment is making money, then I would say 100%. And that's only been in the past, virtual production. I really started going hard on it in the past year and a half. Before that, I was just dabbling in it.
I mean, I wonder. I didn't go to film school, but I went to undergrad adjacent to film school kids, and I feel like there are folks who would like become sound engineers or mixers or DPs in order to fund like what the actual projects they want to make, and so they had like this day job that was in the industry. It was adjacent, but it kind of let them do like their own personal content creation as well. And I wonder if there's like perhaps an equivalent to that. Sorry, an equivalent to that in virtual production. I mean, we mentioned some entry points, but I think that might be one way for it to become quote unquote lucrative, since these jobs will become more in demand. So maybe if you're an independent artist, finding a niche that allows you to kind of take clients on, but still have enough time to focus on the project you want to make. That might be one approach.
I haven't made any money with virtual production, but selling it, yeah, and clients have been making money. There have been a, a lot of, like you said, the workforce in the VP world is very small right now. So getting into that is it. It's this is a very good time for that. Everyone keeps asking for more Unreal artists, people for VP operators, or someone who just knows the system. Really, I've gotten that. Like, I just need to talk to somebody who kind of even knows what virtual production is. I'm like, great, like so. I think right now, like you said, it starts off as a passion, or you work your way up to it, but eventually, yeah, I think it could start becoming lucrative.
And I should also mention that um, I to get a job as an Unreal artist, technical person, yeah, much easier. I'm a content creator, so it's different. So I'm trying to make money off of my whole content and my IP. So even though I'm not doing it full time, I mean, I actually can see like it happening very soon, sooner than I expected. But right now, I could actually apply for a job as an Unreal Engine something. But I choose not to because that's not what I want to do. That's not my passion either. But I think you could get into the workforce really fast. Like if you know the basics of Unreal,
Mhm.
you can help another Unreal be their assistant. Even for me, it would have been helpful like for someone to hey, go find 5 characters that fit my IP, and then they do it and rig it for me.
Yeah.
Or set up the cameras for the scene, or set up the tracker on the camera on the practical camera. So there's you get into it. I think if you're really patient with yourself, yeah, you could get a job, but it
Mhm.
depends. There's a difference between like you are an artist, content creator, you want to sell that stuff or make money off of it,
Yeah.
or you want to work in the workforce, which that I think is way faster and pretty lucrative. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe working in the workforce can then fund your creative
Correct.
projects
Yeah.
if you have
Yeah.
both,
Yeah.
you know? I want you all to, share a little bit about what are you working on? What's next for you? What are you, really focused on in your respective spaces? And then if there's things you want people to see or be involved with, how can they find out about, what you're doing?
I mentioned it earlier. I'm doing an episodic about the Dr. Dennis in the metaverse. And so really I've finished all the pre-production in the sense, and it's really just producing the actual first episode. So that's what I'm working on currently. I just have to do some testing tomorrow that I didn't get to today because all my batteries were not charged. um, and then and so that's what I'm working on. And the goal is for this first season to just kind of be just like episodic formulas, right? TV shows, right? They're all kind of the same formula, same beat sheet, and there's music involved, so I have to write music as well. It's just like one musical number. Episode one will have two, but the rest have one. And then you can find me on yeah, you can see all my stuff on YouTube, the live action, the beginnings of Gross Anatomy, and even like the more recent little teasers from the virtual production stuff on youtube.com/Gross Anatomy. Gross Anatomy is the name of the channel. LinkedIn, I post almost all my behind the scenes there. Everything is on LinkedIn. I'm pretty constantly posting what I'm working on. And you can kind of even see some like what I'm working on in Unreal Engine and how I created something. And that's Adrian Miranda. It should say like healthcare entertainment content creator. And then where else? Gross Anatomy Studios on Instagram. And my email is amiranda84@gmail.com. So yeah, so you can kind of reach out to me, ask me questions. I still am at like stage where I'm like, I'm a newbie. I don't really know that much, but I also have to kind of go back and be like, well, no, I actually do know a little bit. So I'm happy to help. Like I was doing a little seminar for Brick, your sister at the company or
No.
similar. No, not sister at all.
Similar.
Similar.
Yes.
Sorry. So competitor.
But we love them.
Yeah,
We
right.
do love you,
There
Brick.
you go. Okay. Not blood related sister, but
Yeah.
like, I get it. So doing like a little seminar about how to create a media, how to make a video play in the virtual space. And so, yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions as much as I know. I don't know everything as well. Similar to what Asian said, is like I have a kind of a one path. There's so many other paths to go in virtual production, and it's not just Unreal Engine. There's other, softwares out there. They're not as large, and then there's also other larger ones. So yeah, happy to stay connected and offer you as much as I can offer from my experience.
With my work with March on Washington Film Festival, I run a VR equity lab, which essentially is nonfiction stories that are related to the civil rights movement or the movements that it inspired. And we run workshops to create in virtual reality, augmented reality. And that program specifically takes short film documentary makers and kind of gears them up to be able to create nonfiction stories in VR. And so we are looking to hopefully launch our second cohort of that program this year. So you can potentially look out for that. With Black Public Media, we have a department called BPM Plus, and that again is focused on immersive, interactive works at the intersection of art and tech. And we have 4 different fellowships actually through Black Public Media, all kind of focused on this particular niche industry, not necessarily virtual production, although that's part of it, but really just anything that utilizes technology, old and new. And so one way to check that out is in April, we have our kind of premiere pitch event. You can kind of see some of the projects that we invest in and some of the kind of artists that we work with, focused on Black makers and Black stories. And then our open calls generally come out in early summer. So that's another way
And the
get
pitch is going to
involved.
be streamed too, right?
The pitch is going to be streamed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, just check out blackpublicmedia.org and learn more.
Please do.
I'm working on, trying to help build the community around the VP world, working on the education side as well. I am actually targeting more universities. They've been reaching out, like, how else could we use this technology within a class? Where I actually spoke with a professor who does a lot of anatomy, like, how can I get my students in like a space where they can actually see all the different parts of the body? So we're trying to
I'm
help
happy to
figure that
help.
out. Yeah, exactly. I'm definitely going to connect. But I put a lot of my clients work on my LinkedIn. It's a great place to follow what I'm up to. But I did want to say, when you guys were talking about like the storytelling, like, thank you, because without you guys, we wouldn't be around. And my former company Red, I actually got to go up and accept a Webby for them, and it's cool because they give you only get 5 words. That's it. You can't do anything more. So ours, it was tools are nothing without talent. So that's something huge to make sure people are creating content, people are using the technology, and it's always evolving and changing. And we all just want to make it better.
Awesome. That's so cool. Well, thank y'all. This has been very fun for me because I geek out on technology and I'm always learning as an educator. I want to constantly be learning and I'm just really excited to be able to share a lot of this and a lot of what y'all do with the community that we have here and the community that we're, inviting into our space. So, this has been amazing. Please connect with these folks. Please see what they're doing out here and tell your stories. I want to just thank you. I'm gonna try to see if I can get this AAA without sounding really weird. But Andrew, Asia, and Adrian, thank you for joining me tonight. This has been amazing. I, appreciate and respect all the work that y'all are doing, and look forward to continuing to work with all of y'all. For those of you out there who are watching, as I have mentioned throughout this, our goal is to bring some of this information and technology to you, and so we're looking forward to launching a lot of our virtual production training and resources to you all. Please make sure you stay close to your emails if you haven't already subscribed to our newsletter, because we will be making a special announcement next week about the offerings that we have. We do want to also thank everybody who has joined us throughout the week for the various programs that we've had. It's been exciting to sort of launch this new initiative, the New York City Center for Media Education, and really just sort of become a catalyst for future creatives, and we're just excited to do that for you. So make sure you follow us on all the socials, NYC CME. Tell a friend to tell a friend. We are not open, but we will be opening soon at our 38th Street facility, and we are coming at you this spring with classes and programs for you. If you have any questions, you can email us at education@mn.org. But outside of that, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for joining us this week. And thank you for being the motivation for what we do here. Have a wonderful night and be safe.